It is great to see so many here today, full house actually, and for those who aren't able, and I realise many more hopefully are listening online as this is recorded. I'm going to talk to you about the document, and this is sort of what I'm going to be covering in the next 20 minutes or so. I'll just explain why we did this particular document. Already Matthew's explained the general principles of HMEP, and I'll just say a bit more about why the drainage guidance was published. And then I'll talk about how we did it and how we consulted and who with. Then I'll go through the main recommendations. There are 12 in the document, and although we've got more detailed case studies following me, I want to go through each one of those recommendations briefly. I then want to talk about the data in the document, because data and handling of data is fundamental to drainage, and 7 out of the 12 recommendations talk about data handling and use of data. And then I'll touch on some of the case studies if we've got time at the end. So why did we do this? Well, Matthew's already set out some of the principles for cost saving and with the pressures that we're all facing at the moment. But with drainage, there's some other pressures as well. You don't need me to tell you what happened in 2007, those of you who were in the country at the time, and also 2010 was a wet year. But the last 12 months, although we haven't had quite so many severe incidents, though there have been a few, have been the wettest 12-month period ending March that has been for a very long time, 50%. Right across the country, I saw the Met Office's data, which was published a few weeks ago, and every single county had extreme rainfall for the 12 months, taking it as a 12-month average. So that's one of the things, and who knows what's going to happen in the future with climate change. There's debate still going on, but I think the scientists have got the upper hand at the moment, and I think there is going to be certain changes coming on as a result of climate change. So that's one of the main drivers, the flooding we've had, and the need to control that and be seen to manage it as well. That's very important, particularly for local authorities. A further thing is the use of geographic information systems, GIS, and the way this has streamlined the use of data. I'll be saying just a little bit about the way the Highways Agency do it, and Mike Whitehead will be saying a bit more about their methods, because I've been working with him quite a lot, and that's a very sophisticated tool now. It came about, this project, partly as a result of the work that was done in 2008 to 10, perhaps 11, and I think Andrew's going to be saying a bit about element 2 work that I think you were working on, and how that has led and indicated the need for specific guidance. And above all, really, this document, the drainage one, does complement the other products which Matthew's just mentioned, and I was one of the working party group that helped or influenced a bit the overall asset management guidance. So we're very much aware when we did this document that we needed to tie in with that as well. So how did we go about doing it? Well, we started by looking at what had been done the previous couple of years on the DFT, on the Element 2 projects, and listened to them. We held a couple of workshops at the end of 2011. Each had about a dozen people come, and that was a very useful forum, both those forums for listening and hearing what was working well, perhaps some of the advantages, because the whole philosophy of HMEP, not just this document, is to pick out the best practices which are happening at the moment in local authorities, maybe refine them, maybe tweak them here and there, but basically see what's happening really well, particularly those that have got clear outputs and have had defined benefits already, and to publish them and highlight them. And so we were learning what came out on the drainage side from these. The report was drafted early last year, and drafts were promulgated through the Asset Management Working Group, which was about a dozen people, mostly drawn from local authorities, 1 or 2 trade association reps, Highways Agency were there, DFT were there. Matthew chaired that group, and they helped refine it, and it was published at the end of November, pretty well exactly 5 months ago to the day, actually, almost at the end of November. So that's how we did it. So what's actually in this document? This is what it looks like for those in the room. Apologies for those online. It's about a 40-page document. It's not very hard to read through. And it's been split into 12 recommendations. And these are grouped in 3 themes. And again, these 3 themes are all integral to the HMEP philosophy, looking at the use of data, delivering a good service, and collaborating. And you'll hear more about each of those later on in the more detailed talks which follow mine. And 7 of the recommendations, as I said, relate to data, because handling of that is important. Also, I want to say that in the document, it's not sort of an abstract document. Each of these recommendations is underpinned by actual case studies. In fact, there's more than one for many of the recommendations, because there are about 16, 17 case studies here. And you can see what's actually happened in various locations in the country already and how that ties into the recommendations. So each of the recommendations is backed up by a case study. The 3 themes. The first one is defining the asset. And we've got 4 recommendations here looking at defining the asset. Understand evolving duties and responsibilities. It's exactly 3 years since the Flood and Water Management Act came in, and several of the regulations and provisions of that act have now been implemented, though not all. Interestingly, just before the Act came in, the previous year, lead local flood authorities have been set up under the European Directive, and they share the same administrative areas as local highway authorities, as you'll know. So it's very important that the people responsible for maintaining the roads, who are the local highway people, talk to the people responsible for planning the flood risk management. And I think, Andrew, you were saying quite a bit about that in your talk. And so it's important that we understand that and keep up to date with the local duties and responsibilities that the public now expect of us. Use of data to inform maintenance and the need to link to our management objectives. Again, this is using data in the right way and planning maintenance so that you're using data and making sure that your objectives tie in with that. Mike Whitehead from the Highways Agency will be saying a little bit about that and about how he uses data to prioritize the work. Selection of survey equipment, that's something which is case study 1, or I should say Peter's presentation, which follows mine, and he'll pick up and show exactly the importance of having selecting survey equipment that is fit for purpose and is something that produces data which can be shared and can be usefully used, but Peter will be saying a bit more about that. When we talk to local authorities, we found that in a few cases, but I wouldn't say the majority at all, that they hadn't fully understood, some of the officers and engineers, how important it was that when you're purchasing and using data, some of the key other staff in the local authority need to be involved. Maybe it's finance, maybe IT, who need to seem to be involved in everything these days, but they're the ones, because if you don't have them on board, it's going to really struggle with how particular packages are purchased, that you've got the right things, that they fit into other stakeholders' packages, and that the data which is you're gathering can be used later. I'll say a bit more about data sharing. The next theme was delivering a good service and how we can use these documents and what's in it to do that. We need to understand, what the service level is, and you can only do that by getting really high quality data, not only knowing the location of the data, but also the condition. Now that's not very easy for drainage because it's underground mostly, and therefore you have to do certain surveys, and it's not something you can just go along and have a quick look at. You actually have to plan almost always to what you're doing with the drainage. But key and important, the data the importance of good drainage data can't be overemphasized. It really is crucial. The Highways Agency, again, Michael said a bit about that, I think, how they're now building up a really comprehensive level of asset management and knowing the data. Certainly the location of the Highways Agency's drainage data is getting close to completion, and the conditions following up behind. But they know that there's still a lot to do, but they're well on the way. And that's the same as far as budget allows for local authorities, particularly for those areas, and maybe it's something to think about, where there are particular locations. It may not be necessary to know about the drainage in a road which has never flooded in 50 years and there's no history of it, but an area which floods maybe annually, you do need to know an awful lot about it to find out what's going wrong, or is there anything you can do about it. So we need to adjust the level of data to the demand and the service level. Solutions, maybe that's a bit of apple pie here, that obviously avoid the process dominating the deliverables. Really find out what's important, and don't be too don't allow the process to dominate. Don't be too set on a particular process. It's the deliverables which is key. I suppose one of the most important things coming out of this is that using resources efficiently and effectively, and using it and targeting the resources in the best place. And that's what both Mike and Andy Stevenson from Cornwall are really talking about, because these two recommendations are linked really. Prioritizing our assets and using limited budgets. And you'll be hearing from both of those how those two very different organisations, and it's good to have a range of organisations, address that particular challenge and how they've overcome it. Ensure data is integrated, so problems rather than symptoms are addressed. When we're looking at data, we're very dependent on other authorities as well, so that you might have your drainage data, but it needs to tie in with the water company's data if you're in an urban area, because chances are, if you are, your drainage will end up in their pipes. If you're in a rural area, chances are the drainage may end up in a river, so you need to know the river characteristics. Maybe there are times when the river is full and the drainage doesn't work as well, or maybe the tide's in if you're on the coast. Or maybe you're very dependent on a particular pumping station, and if that breaks down or is a problem, your drainage might be affected. You need to understand and know other things other than your own, maybe. And this is where staff knowledge is important. And we're talking, because obviously the people who do maintain your drainage are the most important people. And it may be that, Joe from the highways maintenance knows that, the station road pumping station, if that doesn't work properly, you flood the local estate. Now, maybe that pumping station has never gone wrong, but you need to just be aware of the risk of that happening. And it may be not your pumping station, it might be a water company's pumping station. And that's the sort of thing where staff knowledge can be really helpful. And that's why it's important to share data, and so the water company, in that particular case, knows that you're very concerned about that, or maybe you've discussed the risks with them. Maybe you're very happy with them. But those are just examples of the sort of thing where it's important to be aware. Forming partnerships is really important. Case study 4 that Andrew will be talking about explains how he's done that in Warwickshire with other authorities, and how they've done that, how they had to do it really in 2007, and what's happened as a result of that. And that's a key aspect. And as Matthew said, we've got 150 plus local highway authorities in England alone, I think it is. And some of them need to form partnerships. If you're the highways agency, you don't need to. Maybe if you're Cornwall, you don't need to, I don't know. But some of the local London authorities probably do, and of course they are, and they're getting together to do that. So it's really on a case-by-case situation, but the importance of forming partnerships and sharing and getting other expertise is something that we've talked about here. I'd just like to say a little bit about data before I finish. This is, for those of you who were at the talk I gave in November at the launch, this is some of the things which we talked about there. The importance of obtaining data wisely. It could be from drawings, it could be from schemes, it could be validating data which no one has really checked in the last, several years or more. And it would be going out to stakeholders such as the water companies, such as the river authorities, and finding out what they've got and how that can affect your drainage in the ways I've explained already. Using data, I've explained already, it needs to be linked to objectives that we've got, making sure that IT systems are compatible, that sort of thing, and prioritizing the work, as I've said already. Make sure that your data management strategy in IT ties in with the overall authority's IT. That may be an obvious thing to say, but sometimes they don't. Or maybe if the local authority is rolling out a new IT system, you need to make sure you've got an important say in it if you can. Share data widely. This was a key fundamental from the PIT review, and there's quite a lot going on at the moment about environmental data sharing, and flood data is a form of environmental data sharing. Personally, I think it should be completely free if it's data, free to all points. I'm not saying the interpretation should be free, but certainly the raw data, I think, should be free and freely available. And I think people are beginning to come around to that view now. With anyone who should have an interest, that'll be obviously people like the Environment Agency, who have a strategic role in flood risk management, your colleagues in the lead local flood authority, water company people, internal drainage board, the sort of people would have maybe some private large estates or firms, that sort of thing. It's I think important that we do share our data as widely as possible. The 16 or so case studies in this document, they all demonstrate good practice at the moment. They're all absolutely up to date. This was produced last year and was verified then. All those case studies have produced demonstrable benefits, sometimes called cashable benefits, but they are real things. And all have improved the management of drainage assets. They haven't been put in just for the sake of it. We have quite a lot to choose from, and we think we've chosen the best 16. So just to summarize, flood risk management and drainage management will become more challenging. The public will continue to expect more. Flood risk management's got a very high profile now, and I think it's politically fairly high on the agenda. That's my third bullet point. Going backwards, funds are going to be short. We already know about that. So it's a case of doing more with less, if you can, or working out how to do more with less, not if you can. And finally, the climate changes to bring more stormy weather. No one knows quite what's going to happen. Certainly no one knows what the weather's going to be like in a few weeks, let alone 20 years. But we need to be ready for the worst, whatever that is. So this document is just a next step forward on drainage management. There'll be further documents, I'm sure, in the next few years. We've just hopefully moved things on one step forward, because we're all in it together, I suppose, and we're all aiming for the same objective, which is more efficient management of drainage assets.